Hi, this is Watukobesa again, and yeah, we're going to look now at a very important topic in positional chess. This topic is about the advantage of the two bishops. Yeah. So um, basically, the two bishops. That means when you have an advantage of the two bishops, you have the two bishops, and the opponent either has two knights or bishop and a knight. And there are certain ideas that were developed from the time of Steinitz in terms of how to play with the two bishops. And the other reason why it's an advantage to have the two bishops is that you can trade into any other position. For an example, you can trade into bishop against bishop of the same color, or you can trade into bishops of opposite color, or you can trade into a position where you are playing bishop against knight. So you have all these options if you have the two bishops. So that is why two bishops are available from a positional point of view. But of course, we are going to talk much later on about ideas of compensation. The opponent can give you two bishops but get something in return. So that we will discuss later. But the game we're going to look at now is a game from 1883, and it was played by Wilhelm Steinitz. And yeah, we're going to see a number of very nice ideas that he played in this game, and it had a big influence on how such positions are played even today. Okay, let's go into the game. So English played e4. Steinitz responded with e5, knight f3, knight c6. Yeah, around this time, this is the so-called classical opening, because almost all the games were opened with e4, e5, or d4, d5. And yeah, it's my take that you cannot be a complete chess player without having at least once played against e4, e5, or against d4, d5, or yourself play e4, e5. You need to play these structures, and also the other advantage is that if you are a keen chess player, someone who wants to improve, it means obvious that you'll study more and more games, classical games, and when you are playing these openings, you have more chances of playing the ideas that you absorbed from those games. Okay, bishop b5 is played, and here Steinitz plays the move g6. G6 is a perfectly playable move. The idea is to put the bishop on g7 and control the center. And okay, English played the move d4. We understand, immediately attacking the strongest pawn in the center. Of course, in today's world, what is recommended is to play a little bit slower in such positions as white, because white has got space after all. So in today's world, players will play a move like c3, and after bishop g7, they will castle, and then later on they will play the move d4. Rook e1, knight d2, knight f1, bishop a4, bishop c2, as we've seen in other structures, and white will have a slight advantage in that position. But okay, d4 is perfectly playable. Steinitz takes, e takes d4, and English took knight takes d4. Well, today theory recommends bishop g5 immediately, and after bishop e7 to take on e7. Sometimes h4 is a move I myself have played once in a while. And h4 is also very interesting. It's a very dynamic position, and white is slightly better, but nothing to write home about. Okay, but English took knight takes d4, bishop g7, bishop e3, protecting the knight, knight f6, knight c3, castles, castles. Now, this is what we shall call the first critical position. It's critical because now you must think. You need to start thinking, and you need to start figuring out for yourself how you would continue in this position. Right. So first thing to do is to say to yourself, what am I trying to do? The answer is, as we have always been talking about, you want to attack the strongest pawn in the center. So if you have, black wants to play the move d5. This is the desirable move. Black would love to play the move d5. Then the next question is, okay, what are the problems? The problem is that c6 would be hanging, because white has got two pieces that are attacking c6. If you play knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, you'll find that it's even more difficult to play d5, and white controls even more of the center. Yeah, this is not what you want to play. So Steinitz comes up with a very nice idea. And the first time I saw this game, I was very impressed by this idea, because to me it was not usual for someone to fight for the advantage and then move a piece backwards, But Steinitz played the move knight e7, a very good move, because he wants to play the move d5. It's just very important to realize that e5 now, because remember why am I looking at e5? Because remember what we said. Before you make a move, you have to say what is the disadvantage of this move. The disadvantage of playing knight e7 is that you no longer are attacking the center. And if the opponent plays e5, you need to have a response for this. But okay, Steinitz would play a move like, say, knight d5. And if, let's say, bishop g5, maybe to take on c3, and yeah, something like d5. And we can see that black has absolutely nothing to worry about. He controls the center, and white has got the double pawns, and black should be fine here. All right, so yeah, the move knight e7, immediately d5 is a move that Steinitz wants to play. Okay, English, maybe he can try to play stronger here, but he didn't find the right ideas. But okay, it's not interesting for us to, because the game was played in 1883. We are just more interested in the technique that Steinitz played, so that we can learn from the technique. Yeah. So he plays queen d2, and immediately Steinitz plays d5. So Steinitz has now equalized because the pawn is on d5. He takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, and plays queen takes d5, putting the queen on d5. We've learned this. Why is he playing like this? Well, if you've looked at the videos of, for example, games by, we discussed why the queen on a central queen is so strong. You should know the game by now. Adams against Torre Repetto in 1920. Very important game. If you don't know this game, go back to the videos and look at it, and then you'll understand why it's important to maintain a queen in the center that cannot be attacked easily, So okay, he plays bishop e2, and now Steinitz plays knight g4. He plays this move simply because he sees that he's going to exchange one of the bishops. So takes the knight, and bishop takes, knight b3. So we reach this position. Yeah, this position has been discussed by many analysts, and actually they even said maybe a move like queen c4 is not a bad move, to play rook d8 and to continue with the pressure. But Steinitz, we have to admire his technique from here, because, okay, let us talk about this issue of the two bishops. When you have the two bishops, and your opponent doesn't have two bishops, of course, the first thing you want to do, if you can, is you want to have an open center. Now, an open center is exactly as in the game. There is no pawn on e4, no pawn on e5, no pawn on d4, no pawn on d5. The center is open, which means that the bishops have a reach, they have maximum strength. The second important thing to understand with an open center is that the opponent will not find an outpost for the knight. We will get to this a little bit later. So Steinitz takes queen takes d2, knight takes d2. So he's happy that there is no pawn in the center, and he feels that he's going to be able to press this position and win. Right. The question is now, what must he do? How must he go on about winning such a position? We learn from Steinitz's games, the first thing that you have to do is you need to restrict your opponent's bishop by placing your pawns on the same color of squares as the bishop. So if the bishop is white, you should try to place your pawns on white squares. If the bishop is black as here, you should try to place the bishop on black squares. That's the first thing. Second thing, you must be careful that your opponent cannot get an outpost with his knight, that you cannot chase the knight away with a pawn. I'll make an example here. Let us say black plays b6. Okay, let's defend the pawn. c5. I'm just making an example here. And now black plays c4 and white plays knight d4. This type of position is the one that you definitely do not you definitely don't want to allow, because the knight on d4 is sitting pretty. That knight is now on an outpost. And once the knight is on an outpost and it cannot be moved, then that is, we'll get to that in terms of when we get to instances of how to fight against two bishops. But that's for later. But now, if you allow the knight to have an outpost in the center, this is horrible for you, because now this knight now starts to play. And notice that now your pawn on c4 means that your bishop on g4 is maybe not as good as all that, because maybe the pawn will block the bishop in some positions. So this is what Steinitz has to be careful of. So let's look at the position knight takes d2. Okay, the first thing to see is that the pawn on b2 is obviously not hanging, because if you take the pawn, rook b1 and the rook takes on b7. Yeah, of course. So he plays the move rook a to d8. So now there's a threat to take on b2, because for an example, let us say the opponent plays a harmless move like say king h1, then he wants to take on b2, and after rook b1 he wants to play the move bishop d4, and now all of a sudden you cannot take on b7 because he will take on e3 and you take on d2. So of course here rook a d8, it also follows the principle of bringing pieces that are not in the game, centralizing them and putting them on effective squares. Rook d8 is a good move. The opponent plays c3. Notice now that, remember what we said, as soon as the opponent makes a move, you ask yourself, where was that pawn before? What was it doing? What is it not doing now? That pawn was on c2. It was controlling the white square. So now the square d3 has become weak. Okay? So Steinitz plays the other rook to e8 with a tempo, a free move, because the threat is to take the bishop. The threat is rook takes e3, f takes e3, rook takes d2. So yeah, the opponent plays knight b3. So we have a critical position in our hands. And Steinitz plays a very strong move, b6. Remember what we said. I want to place the pawns in such a way that they will fight against the bishop. So the pawns will be on the same color as the bishop. And number two, make sure I don't create an outpost for the knight. And then after that, it should be easy. So h3, bishop e6, rook d1, c5. Very strong move. Now this move, notice that both pieces are sort of starting to be ineffective, because both pieces cannot reach d4, and these pawns are playing against both of the pieces. This is incredible skill by Steinitz, and it's not so difficult to do the same in your own games. So the opponent plays bishop g5. It's a bad move. But we cannot blame him too much because he doesn't understand. You know, it's 1883. He was playing, he still didn't understand what Steinitz is playing for. So Steinitz plays f6 and king f7 and g5. Another pawn on the black square. Exchanges rooks, and now h6. The idea of h6 is to play f5 to open up for the bishop. Rook e1, f5, f4, bishop f6, g3. Now we reach this position. Now it's time to again put the opponent under pressure. And here Steinitz does what is called a structural attack. And normally a structural attack, you know, once the opponent has pushed just one pawn, those pawns are starting to be weak. So now if we look at these three pawns, the pawn on a2, the pawn on b2, and the pawn on c3, they have become slightly not weak, but they are vulnerable because of this push that went of the pawn that went to c3. So now Steinitz immediately attacks these pawns by playing the move a5. The idea is to play the move a4 and a3 just to attack the structure. So the opponent plays knight c1 and now a4. Now notice that a3 is a big threat. a3, and then afterwards the pawn on c3 falls and the position crumbles. So poor English has to play a3. But now the white squares are becoming weak. He plays bishop c4. The squeeze, applying the squeeze, tightening the grip on the position, making sure the opponent cannot move. He plays king f2. Right, now we reach a very important position again. It's very important when you are playing that you are not, you know, you don't start to be so mesmerized by your position that you keep moving your pieces backwards and forwards without purpose. What has to happen is that at some point you have to understand that you need to change one advantage for another advantage so that you move on. So in this position, we have extracted as much as we can from the position. Then Steinitz asks himself, which of my opponent's pieces is the strongest defensive piece? Which piece is doing good defensive work? Because if I can exchange that piece, then my task becomes easier. That piece is the bishop on e3. It stops rook d2, and anyway, it's you know, it's quite a good piece defending. You know? So Steinitz finds a way to exchange this piece. He plays taking on f4. Remember what we said about the two bishops. We said that they had an advantage because you can choose at the right moment to trade into bishop against bishop, bishop against knight. You can choose. So he chooses to trade now to bishop versus knight, but strong bishop versus a knight that is not active. He takes on f4. It's not possible for white to take back with the pawn because of bishop h4 check, of course. So he takes with the bishop, and now he plays the move bishop g5. Bishop takes g5, h takes g5, king e3, king f6, and after h4, he exchanges the rook. And now it's important not to play king g6. Because if you play king g6, king f2, king h5, king g3, and you still have to fight here. Yeah, there's something in the end game called shoulder charging. It's as if you are running, but at the same time you are blocking the other rook with the other king with the shoulder. So he plays king e5, shoulder charging. Now notice that if white plays king f2, he plays king f4. And after king f4, he will then be able to win this pawn. If the opponent plays the move h5, of course, in the end game, we're still going to talk about this, but the most important thing is the so-called rule of the square. So, for example, let us look at this pawn. If you want to see whether you can stop a pawn or not, all you do, you look like this. You start with the pawn, you go diagonally to the end of the square, you come back and you make a square. So now, after you've done all this, you will notice that you've got a square going on here. You see? That is the rule of the square. Now, if your king can be inside the square, you can catch the pawn. If your king is outside the square, you cannot catch the pawn. So here the king is safely inside the square, which means that there is no danger in this position for black. black will always manage to catch that pawn. So if white plays the move h5, now here's the square. It's a mistake to play king f4. You're out of the square, and the opponent plays h6 and is running. But no, after h5, you go back into the square and you will take the pawn. Easy. So the opponent plays the move knight e2. Now Steinitz takes it and plays king f4. The king and pawn endgame is winning. King g4, king e3. If not king e3, then we just take the pawn. So king e3, now we get this move with tempo and f3. And now king g3, and it's lost. Because h5, f2, and we queen before the opponent can queen. So a very nice game by Steinitz that shows how to play with the two bishops. The next game we're going to look at is a game that was played between Bondarevsky and Vasily Smyslov. Now, Vasily Smyslov became world champion, a very strong player. He had 3 matches against Botvinnik, and he's one of those important players who contributed a lot to chess. But okay, anyway, let us look at how he played against Bondarevsky in 1946, and you will notice that he took the lessons from that game by Steinitz. Okay, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, normal, castles, bishop e7. So it's an invitation to a Spanish, Bray Lopez. So normally white plays rook e1, but this time Bondarevsky took on c6. D takes c6 and plays the move rook e1. Okay, of course, his structure, white's pawns are all intact and black's pawns are doubled, but black, as compensation, has got the 2 bishops. So he plays knight d7 because he is expecting the move d4. If black doesn't play d4, white doesn't play d4, it's possible for black to play c5 and stop this move. So d4, pawn takes pawn, queen takes pawn, castles, bishop f4, and now he plays the move knight c5 because he's got nothing against an endgame, Smyslov, because he's got the 2 bishops. Queen takes, bishop takes d8, knight c3. Now we reach our critical position. Right. First thing we do, we analyze the situation. We've got the 2 bishops. What are we trying to do? We now know. We would like to stop the knights from having outposts. We would like to, if possible, place our pawns or some of the pawns on black squares so that they limit the black squared bishop. Okay, let's see how Smyslov does all this. He plays first f5, a very good move, attacking the strongest pawn. Notice that e takes f5 is a disaster for white, because after bishop takes f5, the bishop comes alive, and that is, now you will see the whole problem of not having the 2 bishops. Notice that the pawn on c2 is on a white square, and it's not possible for white to defend this pawn easily because white is missing that white squared bishop, and black is just going to be harassing white on those white squares. So that is why Bondarevsky played the move e5. But now the disadvantage of the move e5, there are 2 disadvantages. The first one, well, the advantage is that it's a pass pawn, but the disadvantage is that it's on the same square as the bishop, and the other disadvantage is that it can be blockaded by the knight. Once a knight blockades this is what Nimzowitsch, we'll talk about Nimzowitsch later. Nimzowitsch wrote about how the knight is a good blockader of pass pawns because it attacks the squares behind that pawn. So anyway, Smyslov plays knight e6, and after bishop d2 he plays very strong move g5. We understand what this is all about. g5 takes away the f4 square from one of the knights. Yeah, if you are to imagine that black does nothing, it would have been possible for white to play his knight to e2 and afterwards to this square f4, yeah, and exchange this important knight on e6, that important blockader. So g5 is a good move. Notice that in an end game, because the queens are not on the board, we cannot talk about a weak king, not in this position, because what are you going to attack it with? So he plays knight e2 to try and get to d4. We stop him. c5, another good move. Again, placing the pawn on a black square, the same square as the piece, and looking at limiting the outpost for the knight. Bishop c3, b5, another very good move. To play b4, but more importantly, to put the bishop on b7. b3, bishop b7. b4 is a mistake. Why? Well, it's a mistake because you're giving c4 as an outpost for the knights. White will move away, and somehow white will get his knight to c4. This is not what you are looking for. This would not be good strategy. So bishop b7, knight g3, and now g4. Limiting the squares for the knight. Bishop e7, because remember the rooks must get into the game. Plays knight h5, and now king f7, knight f1, king g6. The king is an important piece in the endgame. Knight f6, the rook goes to d8, the rook d1. Right. Now let us look at this position. Smyslov plays a very nice maneuver here, because you have to say to yourself, which pieces by white are the most effective pieces? And it seems to us here that the rooks are actually quite effective, because they control open files. The knight on f6 just is seemingly strong, but it's actually very weak because it cannot get back, and it's in danger. So he exchanges the rooks, and he advances with his plan. f4, very nice move, using tactics to improve his position. Knight takes g4 is not possible because h5 traps the knight, of course. Yeah, knight is just trapped. So after f4, he must go back. And now, again, what are we talking about? That trading off one advantage for another. And he takes here, and bishop e4. Remember those white squares we talked about? They are still a problem even now. Pawn on c2 is quite a problem. He plays bishop b2, b4, stopping the knight from getting into the game. The pawn is still a problem. He cannot play c3 to try and save the pawn, because bishop c2 embarrasses the knight. The knight is just lost. It's a very bad position for white. So Bondarevsky plays f3, he takes on c2, and the rest is not so interesting. I'm just going to go very quickly, just for interest's sake, just to see how Smyslov won this game, and that was it. So here Bondarevsky resigns, and you see another important part about the bishop. That's why it's normally said that the bishop is stronger than the knight in the endgame, simply because the bishop can support its passed pawns and stop the opponent's pawns. For example, if you move somewhere, say king d1, I can play c3, and if you try to queen your pawn, I can stop it, with bishop d5, and my pawns are just going to queen. We're going to look at the next game, also involving the two bishops. This game I played in 1990, and it was, I still didn't have an international rating, and I played against a player who was a FIDE master with a rating of 2330, a well-known player by the name of Christian Meyer, and I had the black pieces. So the game is not so good quality-wise, but it's important for me to show you the game based on two things. Number one is that I just wanted to show you that on my way to, trying to become a better player, I obviously had to learn from the classics, and as often as I could, I had to repeat the ideas that I had seen earlier. That is the key. You need to know the ideas so that during your games, if you see a chance to repeat an idea that was played by a strong player, you can. So let us look at the game. I was playing black, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. I played d6, okay. c3, we can understand the ideas to play d4 later on. I played g6. My opponent plays b4. Okay, this is an interesting move because he wants to have the chance at some point to play b5, just to move my knight away from the center and then to play d4 and attack my strongest pawn. I played bishop g7, d3, knight f6, and now I don't like the move bishop g5. It's too early, and when you push pawns, you need to think about weaknesses. So if the move b4 has made c3 and d3 slightly weak, but for us, it's also very important to train your eye to say, where can my opponent attack? For me, I feel that black can attack more on c3 than black can attack on d3 for two reasons. One, the break d5 that black could play will allow black two pieces to get into the game. The knight coming to d5 and the bishop hitting c3 by x-ray. Okay, x-ray meaning that it's attacking c3 through the pawn on e5. So it's better to keep this bishop around here so that it can be a defensive piece as well. Okay, but okay, my opponent plays bishop g5. I castled and then h6. This is always a good idea because it forces the bishop to go to h4. Now the bishop cannot get back to the game. Now here, I was very happy when I looked at this position because although the position is not completely, similar, but there are some. It's not identical, but there are some similarities. I managed to play the move knight e7, and I remember when I played this that I was thinking about the Steinitz game because I want to organize the move d5, and I want to block this pin, h4 to d8 pin, and yeah, there are also ideas of playing maybe the move g5 and knight g6. g5 we've seen also another Steinitz game, by the way, that I have shown against Dubois, where he plays g5. And okay, in that game, he had the h-file and the bishop. But nonetheless, g5 is still an idea that I could play. And after bishop g3, maybe knight g6. And I could try to expand on the king side. Okay, my opponent plays the move d4 immediately. Well, I don't know. It's very aggressive, but I feel that it's not correct. It's not a correct move. So I took on d4 and I played g5. And I take on e4. It's a sacrifice. But it's not really that correct because he's hoping that the weaknesses on my king side could somehow work against me. But it doesn't become. It's not the case. He plays queen d3. Okay, but okay, then it explains because I was a little bit afraid and worried. But now today maybe I will just take here and play d5, and I think there's absolutely no problem here that black should have. Maybe I take here and then I just play the move d5 and then black is fine. But okay, it's understandable that when you are playing a player who's stronger than you, you are worried, of course, about what ideas they have. And here I saw an idea to go into an end game, but to keep the two bishops, in the spirit of Steinitz. I played here d5, bishop back, and then I played knight f5. Of course, I saw the idea that my opponent will take on f5 and then take on d5. But I was banking on the fact that my knight will take one of the bishops, and c3 is quite weak. So my opponent goes into this variation, c6, bishop takes, and let's talk about this position. So again, we see a beautiful position for black, two bishops, controlling the center, and more importantly, the pawn on c3 is also weak. Plays knight d2, bishop d3, rook c1. Okay, a5 is a good move because I just get my rook into the game. Notice that the pawns on h6 and g5 are still, we are playing again like in the principles by Steinitz, which is putting the pawns on the same color as the bishop. So what must we try to do? We must try not to let the knight get an outpost. So it takes, rook takes a5, knight b3, so rook d5 is important, fighting against an eventual knight d4. My opponent plays f3 to get the rook into the king into the game, rook a8, bishop e1, and rook a3. Very good move. Just stopping. You see, there's a principle about the rook. The rook, in order for you to improve the position of the rook, you must make sure that the rook is strong on the file and the rank. So a move like rook a3 does exactly that. It increases the rook strength on the a file and at the same time on the third rank as well. So c4, yeah, it misses some tactics. And the game now, yeah, it doesn't become interesting. It's very important to move your rook to the 7th rank, of course, stop the king from moving out. And another important point in the end game is that even though I saw that if I take here, my pawns are doubled, but in the end game, it's fine because, you know, it's difficult for the opponent to get the pawn back. So rook there, and now it's time to activate the king. b5, fine. Rook back, and now the king is in the first rank and the king is quite weak. So now we need to get our king in so that we could maybe eventually mate the king. So h3 is a very nice move, and after takes f4, very good to play the king in and to attack their king. So king there, and now we just are 2 pawns up, and it is a simple win. Check to drive the king away, king g2 and h2, and my opponent resigns. It's of course an easy win. So yeah, in terms of quality, not much going on in that game, but I think that it's you know, when I look back at this game, I sort of I feel happy because it shows that I was trying to take the lessons learned from the classical games and implementing them in my own games. And yeah, the idea is that you should also try to do the same.